As someone who did Ball Lightning as their first ever Sorcerer build back at the start of Diablo 4, this has been my favorite build in the entire game since it came out, and being able to see how insane this build has become this season makes me so happy. So I want to take the past few days and test out a bunch of different stuff with this build and get you guys the best Ball Lightning build possible. I personally think this is the best build in the entire game. In terms of speedrunning tier 100s, killing uber bosses, it's crazy. That Lilith kill that you guys saw at the start of the video, that was 3.5 seconds from when I teleported in to when that phase ended. It is crazy how fast it kills these bosses, and you can do literally anything without really changing anything at all on this build. Like, you just equip what I'm going to say in the video and you just go. Don't have to worry about swapping for bosses, for Nightmare Dungeons. It is all set and ready to go. So I will just say, if you end up liking my balls, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel for more Diablo 4 builds here coming very shortly. Now, since I had played Ball Lightning a few times in the past, I didn't want to start the season with it, so it was really cool to see how crazy people were going with it. But like I said, I want to take a few days and kind of mess with different options with it and get to the best performing build that I could for you guys. And I think this is going to end up being it. It's a little bit different than a lot of the other variations that are rolling around right now. And personally, I just think this thing does everything. And I don't even have all the perfect gear. Like, all the clips that you guys saw at the start of this video was pretty much all level 15 glyphs. I've leveled them up last night. I was just speed running some tier 100s and got most of them up to 21, but for the most part, in all the clips that you guys saw, were around level 15 glyphs. You're essentially a walking wrecking ball with this build. It's very fitting considering it's Ball Lightning, but the whole point of this build is basically just get spinning and then just mow through everything. Even on tier 100, even in co-op, things will just evaporate around you. It is crazy. I've never experienced something like this in Diablo 4 yet. And it is so powerful. You are going to speed through everything. You're basically also going to be at movement speed cap the entire time, so you will seriously be flying. With all that introduction stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this build fully here. I always like to talk about our skills first. So Flame Shield, this is going to be really good for obviously not dying, but also it's going to reduce our mana costs, which is very good, so we can spam more Ball Lightnings when this is active. And then Teleport is going to be really good just for getting around. Like I said, speed is everything with this build. You want to keep that momentum up, and just getting from pack to pack with Teleport is very helpful. Frost Nova just to CC enemies and making them vulnerable, but the vulnerable part actually doesn't really matter too much. It's just a guaranteed way of doing so. Unstable Currents, this way we can just go crazy. We get more Ball Lightnings, we get more Lightning Spears, we get more Chain Lightnings for maintaining our mana. This is definitely a very big item here in our skill bar. And then I'm currently running a Lightning Spear. I know some versions of this build run like Ice Armor. I personally think Lightning Spear is the best. It's going to give us a damage bonus. It's going to stun all the enemies in front of us and just overall help us out a lot more than Ice Armor. We don't need the mana regen that enhanced Ice Armor gives us, so I personally like to skip out on that. I think Lightning Spear is much more beneficial. And then obviously Ball Lightning is our main source of damage. But for our enchantments, the one that you're always going to have on at all times is Chain Lightning. This is a big way we're going to be maintaining our mana and casting so many Ball Lightnings over and over and over. And then the other one is going to swap between two, and later on, once I get a new amulet, which I'll talk about later, it might permanently just be one of them. But for the most part, if you guys are going to be doing any sort of bossing, I run the Ball Lightning enchantment. And then if you guys are running high tier Nightmare Dungeons, that's where I actually swap out the Ball Lightning enchantment for Lightning Spear, because we're creating so many crackling energies. You guys are going to have a bunch of Lightning Spears flying around you at all times, which are all going to be giving you a damage bonus, and then also are stunning literally everything, so nothing will be able to attack you. You can just run around like a lawnmower and cutting down the entire packs of enemies throughout the dungeon. So I find Lightning Spear to be very beneficial in terms of survivability in late game Nightmare Dungeons. So those two you can swap around and see which one fits best, but I will tell you guys why Lightning Spear might be my permanent one a little bit later on. But let's go ahead and jump into the skill tree itself. So in our basic slots, we really don't need anything from here. You just need 2 points to move on down, so I just threw those into Firebolts. But once we're down here, I'm going to be grabbing 1 point in Devastation so I can get 3 points into Elemental Dominance. This way we can have our balls dealing 9% more damage. And then we're going to be grabbing just 1 point in Chain Lightning. We just need it active for the enchantment. And then grabbing Destructive Chain Lightning so we can form more Crackling Energies. So the Chain Lightnings themselves, when they bounce around, are going to give us mana. And they're also going to be creating Crackling Energies. When we pick those up, those will also give us mana. And then Flame Shield, I run Mystical Flame Shield for the mana cost reduction, just so we can spam at the start of boss fights. Obviously, the immunity is really nice too. Teleport, I like to just get around, and I run the 30% DR. And then we're going to max out Glass Cannon. I do end up putting 1 point into Elemental Attunement, just so we can get a little bit more cooldowns going, and we have 1 point left over at the end of all this, so that's just where I put it. And then Frost Nova and Mystical Frost Nova down here for the guaranteed vulnerable in case we need it at the start of a fight. And then as we move down to our Conjuration, Lightning Spear, we are going to be grabbing Invoked Lightning Spear. This is what's going to be stunning all the enemies, and your Lightning Spears are going to be guaranteed to critically hit once you guys are playing this build properly, so they will always be stunning everything that they hit. And then we are going to be grabbing Conjuration Mastery, because we are going to have more than one of these out at a time, especially during our ultimate. During an Uber Lilith fight, I will very, very consistently see like 5 to 6 stacks of this, and I've seen upwards of 8 or 9, and that is going to be a lot of extra damage for us. And this is going to be one way we can deal a lot more damage, and something that I don't see the other versions of this build running too often. And then otherwise, on all of these defensive skills over here, Align the Elements, Protection, and Mana Shield, I max all 3 of those out. And then obviously max out Ball Lightning. You're going to have points of it on your pants and your amulet, so you can have rank 12. And then if you guys are lucky enough to get the Shaco, you can get, what is that, rank 16 of Ball Lightning, whatever it is. So it's going to be crazy once you guys get like the Uber uniques going, but it's obviously already crazy and you don't really need more damage on it, but it'll be fun to try that out once I get my hands on one. Otherwise, we do grab Wizard's Ball Lightning so we can create more and more Crackling Energies and sustain our mana and spam more of them. And that's going to bring us into Static Discharge and Invigorating Conduit. These two, Invigorating Conduit is very important, 12 mana per Crackling Energy we pick up. So as you guys are attacking, just run around in like a little mini circle, and you'll be picking up all the Crackling Energies you make and stay at full mana. Also, we can create more of them with the Lucky Hit Chance. Now, Ball Lightning does not have a great Lucky Hit Chance, but it's hitting so many times with our attack speed. This adds up, and we end up getting a lot more Crackling Energies to spawn. Maxing out Unstable Currents here for our ultimate, and then 1 point into Coursing Currents, just so we can move down and grab Electrocution and make enemies deal a little bit less damage. And then finally, as our key passive, we're going to be using Veer's Mastery for the extra damage and also making enemies deal less damage to us. So that is very, very important for our survivability and damage. But overall, that is what I'm currently running with our skill tree. Time to take a look at our gear, starting off with our helmet. So on my helmet, I'm running the Godslayer Crown unique. If you guys do not have this unique yet, you can just run anything with like max life, cooldown, and max mana, and then something defensive with the Mage Lord's aspect, so you can help out your key passive a little bit more and get more DR out of it. So if you want to be also more tanky, you can just ditch the Godslayer Crown altogether and run that. But I do like the grouping and the damage bonus out of this. We're not going to be using the raiment, so I do like having that grouping. And then for our chest piece, since we are not running the raiment, like I said, something with lightning damage is very nice. And then 3 defensive, so max health, or DRs, anything like that, you can fit it in. And this is where I put my Disobedience aspect for the stacking armor. And then on my gloves is where I run the Elementalist aspect, so I can get that 40% crit chance on my Ball Lightnings. And I'll show you guys why that's so helpful. We can essentially get 100% crit chance almost at every second of playing, which is really nice. And then here's where I run the attack speed, so our Ball Lightnings do benefit from attack speed. Crit chance, lightning crit damage, and chance to restore primary resource are usually the 4 affixes that I run on my gloves. And then for the pants, Ranks of Ball Lightning is like the main requirement here. And then otherwise, anything defensive, so DRs, total armor, max health, stuff like that here on your pants will do you well. And this is where I run the extra charge of Frost Nova, just so we have another cooldown to our name and ends up allowing us to freeze a lot more enemies and prevent them from attacking us. And then on our boots, I end up settling with the Esu's Heirloom pretty much at all times. These are better for bossing than the Flicker Step, which is the other really nice option. This is really good for spamming your ultimate, but an issue I found with the Flicker Steps is since the Ball Lightnings are always orbiting us, by the time I'm trying to evade through a group of enemies, I've already deleted them. Like, the Ball Lightnings kill enemies that fast that I can't usually get these to activate. The best times I can get this to go is when I purposely don't cast Ball Lightnings, freeze the enemies, and then dodge through them. And by then, I'm already slowing myself down, so I'd rather just run through it at essentially max movement speed with the evade grants 75% movement speed on these. Also, this is going to help out our attack speed as well with one of our vampiric powers, which we'll get to later. But this is going to be very nice for us because if we go ahead and take a look at our crit chance over here, once I am out of the no combat zone, we can see it's about 40% right now. And if I dodge, it is going to go up to 62%. And then if we add that 40% when we cast those Ball Lightnings above 100 mana, look at that, 100% crit chance. All those ticks of our lightning balls will end up critting. So that's going to be a lot of damage. Crit chance is one of the most important things in the game right now with all the changes to the damage formula. Getting that 50% X damage for free is incredibly helpful. So that's personally why I do like to run Esu's Heirloom, but you guys can experiment with these two yourself. If you don't have these uniques yet, just run something with movement speed and then ranks to your cooldown skills like Frost Nova and Teleport. That'll help you guys out a lot. For our jewelry on the amulet that I have right now, the big thing that you guys are going to want is ranks to all mastery so you can get to that Ball Lightning boosted up more, and mana cost reduction. Mana cost reduction made a big difference once I was able to roll that on this amulet. It's going to help you spam way more of these. Right now I have this down to 33 mana cost, which is pretty decent, but I can get it even lower. But on the rest of the affixes here, something that I really want to try and what I was kind of hinting at earlier would be ranks to the Conjuration Mastery passive here. So we can end up getting 6x damage per lightning spear that is out. And like I said, I've seen upwards of like 8, 9. I'm sure there's more because there's a lot of times I can't even see this active on my buff bar just because I have too many buffs. This thing gets pushed off and I don't see what it's actually at. So that would end up being a lot more damage for us and why I'd really like to give it a go on here. And that might be where I end up entirely swapping out the Ball Lightning enchantment for the Lightning Spear enchantment. But once again, this is what I run for dungeoning. And then when I go to like an Uber boss, I'll swap back to Ball Lightning. But I would love to just keep this active at all times so I don't even have to think about changing anything, which is why I really want to try that here on our amulet one day once I get a good one. Otherwise, ranks to defensive is a really nice option just because we're not running any ranks to our defensive skills on our boots. They are going to hurt in the cooldown department, so it's nice to have +3 over here. But this is where I run the Ball Lightning Orbits you. It isn't our biggest damage boost out of all of our options, but it is the most consistent. It will be active at all times, so I just thought that would be the one that I boost by 50%. And I've been really happy with it so far, but you guys can move around a couple of these damaged ones if you want. If you want something else up here on the amulet, go for it. But currently I'm running Ball Lightning. On the rings, this is where I run Edge Masters here on one of my rings. If you guys are having mana troubles, you can run 2 mana generators. So our other one is going to be each time Chain Lightning bounces, you gain 3 mana. That's why we're running it as one of our enchantments. This is going to help you guys out a ton. It's going to really, really add up and let you spam more Ball Lightnings. And then you could use like the Prodigies aspect. So you use a cooldown and get 25 mana if you are having mana issues. But currently with this setup, I do have none, as you guys saw in all of the opening clips. So that's where I run Edge Masters. Our resource is almost always full, so you're almost always going to have this damage bonus. And then otherwise I run crit damages, lightning damage is a big one, and then like resource generation and max mana are usually what I look for on my rings. Here on the other one I have some crit chance, just so I can get myself above that 100% crit chance once everything's active. and then lightning damage, lightning crit damage, and max mana, like I said. Essentially, you're going to want enough mana on your rings. So if you look at your baseball lightning, so mine costs 33, I'm going to want my mana to be at least 133. So that way I can cast ball lightning twice and get to the elementalist aspect active on both those. Gives me a little bit of leeway when spamming these and running around and picking up the crackling energies to make sure that elementalist aspect stays active for that crit chance. For our weapons, I like to run a wand for the lucky hit chance. And then here's where I run like all stats, intelligence, vulnerable damage. I also have damaged burning, which isn't really helping me. It does sometimes for some bosses, but there are better options you can have here. But this is where I run the conceded aspect for damage while you have a barrier. You're always going to have a barrier when you're spacing out your cooldown, so free 24% damage right here. And then on our focus, I currently like to run a little bit of crit chance, once again, just to get me to that 100% marker. Chance to restore primary resource, mana cost reduction is a big one. And then the last one, you can do a couple different options, but just find whatever is best with those three that I had mentioned. And then this is where I run the Storm Swell for the increased damage to vulnerable while you have a barrier. This is one of those things that's also almost always going to be active. Every enemy is going to be vulnerable. You're always going to have the barrier. Free damage right there. But that is all of our aspects and gear. Quickly just going over the gems in case you guys missed it. Rubies on the armor for max health. I like to run emeralds for the increased crit damage to vulnerable enemies. And then on the jewelry, just fill in your resistances based on where they're needed. So currently I almost have complete max. My cold resistance is lacking just a hair, but yeah, just fill these in wherever you need them. Quickly going over our vampiric powers for the build, I want to start off with Ravenous, just because I was hinting at this earlier with our Esu's Heirloom. So not only will the Esu's Heirloom give us guaranteed crits once everything's thrown together, this is also going to greatly increase our attack speed bonus from this power. So right now, as you guys can see, it's at 47.5%. If I go ahead and dodge, it's going to jump up to 77.5%. Because we get that 75% movement speed for 3 seconds after we dodge with these, this is going to jump up with it. So this is going to help us deal a lot more damage on top of the guaranteed crits that we're already getting from the Esu's Heirlooms. That's why I really like these for the total synergy in the build. Then for the other powers, Undying for survivability, Domination, our Lightning Spear is stun for us, our Frost Nova's freeze, so free 24%. Prey on the Weak for the damage to vulnerable. Basically everything you fight is going to be vulnerable because of our chain lightnings and one of our Paragon nodes, which we're going to get to next. So that's free 16% there. Now this last one you can kind of swap out for a few different options depending on what you're running. So you can run Sanguine Brace for dungeoning. You're going to have a lot of Fortifying. It's going to increase your crit chance. So if you aren't quite at 100% crit chance, you can run Sanguine Brace. You could also run Feed the Coven for bossing and try to get that extra resource and 10% damage. That's an option because we're going to have so many lightning spears going. You could probably get this to proc. Otherwise, you could run a Curse Touch. I don't think this is necessary at all, just because our chain lightnings are guaranteed to make enemies vulnerable with one of our Paragon nodes. So there are a couple different options. Feel free to play around with this last slot and see what fits best with your playstyle. For the Big Daddy Paragon board with this build, I'm just going to go through the glyphs, the boards, and exactly what I'm trying to do with this setup. I don't know if this is 100% the best option. I've been playing around with different allocations of points and seeing what works best, but this is currently what I am running. So in our starting board here is where I put Adept, so we can get that increased damage to our ball lightnings and have them hit a slightly bigger area. So I do just get this to 40 intelligence to have that area active. Otherwise, I'm grabbing the non-physical nodes on the right side. I do dip down to the resistances and up here to the resistances. Otherwise, I go up through the left for more non-physical. Non-physical is going to be a very big part of this build because this will be an additive bonus, but also turn into a multiplicative bonus with one of the legendary Paragon nodes that we'll get to later. And then I go up into the Enchant Master board first, just so once again I can get more non-physical damage here and get their bonuses guaranteed just because of their low stat requirements here. So that's why I go into there and I grab the Elementalist glyph, and that's going to boost these even further. But then I do dip here into the middle for more non-physical damage. on both the left and right side, and then I dip out the right and the top of the board. I did dip out to the right first just so I can have easier requirements on these. So that would be like damage to elites, also movement speed after killing an elite. This isn't 100% necessary, but it is nice if you're not just constantly spamming the Asus heirloom, or if you're running flicker step, the movement speed bonus down here is nice. Otherwise, this is where I throw our destruction glyph for the increased crit damage and stacking damage once you crit them. We're always going to be critting. That's going to stack up to 12 essentially instantly unless you one tap the enemy. Otherwise, I do just kind of fill this up to 25 dexterity, grab a couple things over here like the lightning damage. This is a big one, and the lightning resistance. Lightning damage is very annoying with a lot of the modifiers, so I do like to make sure that is maxed. And then I do dip over here into more lightning damage. We happen to get crackling energy damage. That part's not important, but I'm mainly just grabbing the lightning damage. And then out the top of the board, we're going to be going into the static surge. This is a big way we're going to be maintaining our mana. Also why mana cost reduction is so important, because normally I think this is base 100 mana you have to spend to make your next chain lightning, make enemies vulnerable, and return 10% of your mana. But now it's down to 67 with my current setup. So this is where I'm going to be going into here. I do dip to the right for more max mana just so I can have that grace period on the ball lightnings and the elementalist aspect. And I throw the territorial glyph in here for the damage to close and DR from close enemies. If you are purely trying to boss, you can put flame feeder here, just because your flame shield will make the enemies burn, and something like even Uber Lilith will be burning long enough for you to phase them. So this does end up getting active, even though flame shield is our only way of making enemies burn. But for the most part, just leave territorial in there. You'll be good to go. Then up here in the top middle is where I run Frigid Fate. So this is where those non-physical damages not only count as additive bonuses, but also multiplicative bonuses. So here, we're going to be dealing increased damage to vulnerable enemies based on our total damage with cold. So none of my gear, as you guys saw earlier, had damage to cold on it, but this is up to 26% out of the maximum 30. That is because all of our non-physical damage. So I have the Enchanter glyph in here for an extra amount of non-physical damage. If I go ahead and unequip that, you'll see that go down right here. So that's going to go down to 20%. So that's why glyphs like that and all these non-physical nodes are so important, because these are going to add up. These boost all of your fire, lightning, cold, all those types of damages. All those are going to go up and end up equaling a multiplicative damage bonus for us. Otherwise, I do, for our final board, dip into the Elemental Summoner board. I can grab a little bit extra max mana and max life over here just to get me over that threshold for the grace period. If you guys have good rolls of mana on your rings, you can ditch this little bump up here and put them into like more non-physical damage for the more multiplicative or whatever else you see fit. And then as my final glyph, I run Charge for the picking up the crackling energies. It's going to give us a stacking multiplicative bonus up to 15%. This is the last one you have to worry about leveling. I don't even have it at the 15 yet. It's like level 8 or something, level 7. So don't worry about leveling this one up too much. Just get this thing online at 40 intelligence and you'll be good to go. But that's pretty much everything with our build. Hopefully you did like my balls, and hopefully this works out well for you guys. I do think this is a little bit different than what most people are running, and I've really enjoyed this so far. Once again, you can't really argue with a 3.5 second Lilith phase at level 15 glyphs. That's just crazy, mind-boggling to me. And just the lawnmower style of gameplay where you just walk and everything instantly deletes around you. It is so fun to play. It is so cool to see Sorcerer be struggling so hard before this and now be arguably the best build in the entire game. So that's very fun to see, and I'm very excited to be playing more of this build and getting it perfected and trying it out with maybe some of the uber uniques like the Harlequin Crest once I'm able to get my hands on it. But if you did enjoy the build, make sure you are subscribed to the channel for more here coming shortly. Otherwise, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. See ya.